Interestingly, this is not the first way that I've started a stream like this in the past year, but it is equally as appropriate to inform each and every one of you that I would like to feed your fingertips to the Wolverines. And I say that because here on Geekscape, we are going to be taking a look at the 50th birthday of Saturday Night Live. Earlier in the year, they did their anniversary specials back in February, but we have now surpassed the actual 50-year mark of the show. So we will indeed be discussing that here. I'm Christian Bladt from the Bladt Cast, and I am excited to talk SNL, something that has always been a very important part of my life. And it's going to be fun to take a look at this. And to do so, I am going to bring back some friends that I actually discussed the Saturday night movie with last fall. The voice of the Bladt Cast, Fard Muhammad. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. And America's favorite Brooklyn boy, David Brody.
Doing well, thank you.
Yes, and SNL did some episodes from Brooklyn during the 1976 presidential election. The election coverage originated from 8H, so they went to spare studios out there. And you need to know things like that. If you were ever a professional tour guide at NBC, an NBC page, like myself, and our fourth, Mr. Ron Motta, also a proud alumni of the NBC page program. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Great to have you on here. It's tragic that we're not talking about very special episodes of sitcoms, but we'll have to get back at that and
we'll do that again. Yeah.
Definitely. There's still plenty more. So the idea for this show is that we would take a look at the actual first episode of Saturday Night Live from October 11th, 1975, hosted by George Carlin. Lots of other people also on that episode, which we'll go through, and then compare that to the season premiere of this year, which is actually the 51st season. And that was Bad Bunny and Doja Cat, unless you were me watching it and you never saw Doja Cat. But that's just the way I watch things. Boy, they're very different shows, but I think you could have honestly even compared it to the second season premiere and done that. I'll go sort of clockwise. And Ron, did you see Jason Reitman's Saturday Night movie that was out last year?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I really liked it. My one quibble is that I kind of felt that John Belushi was a little bit of a caricature, you know what I mean?
That's fair. Yeah.
Like, I was like, yeah, okay, we all know, like, the Wild Man, but I was like kind of hoping that they would like kind of dig in a little deeper. But it was interesting because I watched it with my son, and he's like, I tried really hard to make him cooler than me, but apparently didn't take. So he's like, excuse me, like me, he follows SNL and analyzes it like some people do the New York Yankees.
Sure.
But it was like really, it was really, really interesting, the attention to detail. Like when I was looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is a very good representation of 8H. So
they did a great job on that. When we spoke about it in the past, it was just clearly a work of fiction. A lot of things were compressed. Perhaps none of those things happened between the dress rehearsal and the live show. But
right.
I think that the performances, there was a lot of great stuff in it. But when we watched that, I actually had the thought of, I should go back and watch the first episode. But I didn't do it until this came up. So I was kind of glad that I waited. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and if it made us think anything about the film. I just want to make sure Ron had seen it. So Farad, I don't know how many times you've watched the first episode of SNL before. I had seen it before in its entirety, not just the half-hour rerun version. there were very select episodes that my public library had that you could not rent, but just take out on VHS. And the first episode was one of them, so I had seen it before. Many times. But what were some of the things most striking to you about that first episode, Fard?
Well, you could definitely see the DNA of what the show would become in that first episode. I mean, the type of sketches that they did were a little bit shorter, but overall, they had the same sort of amount of irreverence and everything like that. I think that the cast overall, except for maybe Garrett Morris, had some pretty decent roles to play throughout the entire episode. Garrett would end up doing more roles afterwards,
Sure.
but you can only do so much in 90 minutes, and I'm sure that they had to cut a lot of sketches and ended up moving those sort of weeks. So anyway, I thought that Chevy Chase pretty much just hit the ground running in terms of hosting Weekend Update, and yeah, I mean, although there was it looked like there was a bit of a small flub when he was talking about Gerald Ford, because at one point he was talking about getting out of his helicopter, but they switched over to another camera angle and it already had the punchline for the next joke and the next story on the screen, and Chevy kept looking at either was looking at the wrong camera or they switched to the wrong camera and he was looking at what he was supposed to be the correct camera he was looking at. But anyway, despite all that, he was able to maintain his composure and everything like that. Went on to do the prostitution stamp joke, which ended up getting a big laugh. And so,
which is interesting because I didn't remember that he loses his place in the middle of that. And
I did not remember that.
That's kind of one of the most famous jokes from this episode, at least from that segment. I think Carlin has something that he says later that is one of the most enduring. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about some of these things. But since it came up, the Postal Service announcing a stamp to commemorate prostitution, and he has to then check his notes, and it was almost like, is that a bit, or because it was like the joke is pretty easy, but I do think that he was actually reading them off the paper that was in front of him, and just top notch, 10 out of 10. That the stamp costs a dime, but if you want to lick it, it's a quarter. Brody, that's an all-time great setup and punchline, right?
Yes. In fact, I didn't remember it from the show, and when I saw it in the movie, I will say I guessed the punchline because it was obvious, but I didn't write it, and it was brilliant, and it was 50 years ago. So I saw it coming now because that's the style of humor, but back then it was probably groundbreaking and shocking to people at the time. And to me, Weekend Update, we'll go more into detail, but to me, that was clearly the best part of the show, of the first episode, which after watching it again, I watched maybe 20 minutes of it after the movie to see the opening and some of the other things, and to get a sense of Carlin being stoned, but I didn't watch the whole thing. And having watched the whole thing again, I haven't watched it in a long time. I watched it I watched it wondering how they got a second episode. I found it to be unprofessional and sloppy and unfunny, and sketches that didn't go anywhere. That the one sketch, which was the Jamatol sketch, where he's talking about his wife.
Yeah.
And it's clearly a man.
Yes.
And there was no joke
it's Michael O'Donoghue. Well, that's the joke, is that they're gay,
right.
And Jamadol is.
Oh no, but I thought the joke was
humor. Yeah,
I thought the joke, but he said his husband. The fact he said his wife, I made it think. I thought he was gonna maybe make reference to the fact that Jamatol had it was like testosterone and turned her more masculine. I thought that was the joke. I get the gay pun in Jamatol, but then refer to him as your husband. It was incongruous to me, and maybe that's because back then you wouldn't say he's your husband; it wasn't legal. I don't know, but watching it now, I'm I don't get it. Well, I don't see where it's going.
I agree that that's not the strongest moment. I do think it's better than "Show Us Your Guns." Which I think the only moment that works there is the bride and groom walking out of the church, and she's got like a 1920s Tommy gun. So that was at least But
the whole thing was a setup to the fact that the cop didn't have a gun. The whole thing was to show the cop without a gun.
Yeah. And he just shrugs. Yeah. We'll go through some of the things that,
yeah.
that work and didn't work. Ron, what are some of the things that strike you looking back now with 50 years wiser on the premiere episode of the show?
Well, I think the really interesting thing is when you see that first episode, it was very clearly was still a work in progress. And there's like it was much more of a variety show than it was a comedy show. And especially in that first episode, the not ready for primetime players, or as Don Pardo called it, the not for ready primetime players.
Not for ready primetime play. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. His big moment that he messed, the premiere and he messed it up. God rest your soul, Don. Great man.
It was always a treat to see that man wandering around 30 Rock, because he did wander.
He did. I think my favorite thing is when he would come down the hall, he'd see me go, "Hi, Ron," in that booming voice of his, and I always got a little thrill out of it.
He could never not sound that way. It was
I know.
always,
he was Don Pardo 24/7. I mean, he was exactly what you meant Don Pardo to be. But getting back, the interesting thing is, like, they had like guest comedians, they had the Muppets, they had guest artists. I think there was like something like 2 or 3 musical performances, like stuff that
so
was
there's 2 Billy Preston, 2 Janice Ian,
right?
And tell me if I missed something, but that's
two comics.
Yeah,
right.
And Billy Crystal was there as shown in the movie, and he was going to get so little time, his bit didn't work, so he didn't go on. And that is definitely something that's very interesting, because I'm going to say, it's like, Lorne would go on to have an eye for talent, but if Valerie Bromfeld goes on and Billy Crystal stays backstage, you may not have chosen properly. But what were you going to say, Ron?
Well, I'm also sure that that one comedy segment was not at the forefront of Lorne's mind. I think he was worried about like 101 other things, most of which is just getting to air and just making it without falling flat on your face in front of millions of people. The interesting thing, it's funny because we talk a lot about what didn't work on the show. I think a lot of people, particularly SNL fans and particularly fans that grew up in that era, at the start of the show, they speak of the first 5 years very, like it was the second coming. Yeah. And there was a lot of great stuff. It was groundbreaking. It was brilliant. But about a year or so ago, I started going through the first 5 years, like doing sort of like the rewatch. There was a lot of hit and miss. There was a lot of stuff and it was like very much like the show now. There's a lot of brilliant stuff in there, but there's also a lot of
And by the way, when we talk about the first 5 years, most people are talking about the second through fourth years. Even the first through fourth years, because that last year you don't have. Well, you have Anne Aykroyd. You have Peter. But you don't have Dan Aykroyd. You don't have John Belushi. They don't even have Jim Belushi.
Right.
That's like, that's like you get more Harry Shearer, and they've elevated some other people. So, that season is very noticeable for the, like the best known sketch from that 5th season is Lord and Lady Douchebag. And but I agree that there is a sweet spot. It's probably seasons 3 and 4. I would say that for me, people can point and say otherwise. The best episode this show ever did was April 22nd, 1978. Host Steve Martin. He does King Tut. Musical guest, the Blues Brothers.
King Tut.
The sketch at 12:50, the 10-1 sketch, is incredibly funny. So that's how good that week was. Usually the weak spot in the show. To something you said earlier, Brody, how the show got a second week. One thing that helps is that Paul Simon comes on and says, "And I'll be here with Art Garfunkel next
Yeah.
week." So
Yeah.
they were like
a reunion.
and NBC was like, "All right, I mean, we got to at least see that." You know,
But again, the
I didn't
interesting-
realize that. Sorry,
Go ahead,
that,
Brody, yeah.
that it's so long ago that they were broken up by 1975. That they were going to have a reunion at that point. Like, oh, we're gonna get back together in a reunion. I'm like, well, okay. So yes, I understand why they brought it back for a second episode because of that. But as far as the content goes, I mean, it was all over the map. And I mean, we could break it down. But Carlin, knowing that Carlin was stoned and didn't want to do what he was in the movie as far as it was portrayed, it was. If the show wasn't live, I would tell you that he did a set and they cut it up and put it throughout the show. There was no interaction. There was no mention of what's coming up next or anything about the sketches. He wasn't in the sketches. Now we're so inundated now with George Carlin clips on social media of how he was right all the time. We keep seeing his best of stuff and how he's killing it all the time. He bombed terribly. The audience was not into him.
There's the one moment where he says, "Have I told these jokes to you already?"
Yeah.
I think that tells you a lot. But I did reference he has that idea of the oxymoron of jumbo shrimp. That's like government intelligence, which is certainly something that's been in the zeitgeist since then. But and the thing that I noticed is at the end of his set, he's like really leaning into his like final few words because clearly that was like when they were going to hit the applause light and go to the next thing. So, it was a guy who, had obviously been on television, but I don't know that he had done much. The idea that he wasn't in any sketches it's a fact, but I did see an interview with Lorraine Newman where she said he was in a sketch that got cut after dress rehearsal. It was it was the high school reunion for Alexander the Great. So he was in that sketch, and I don't know if they went on and did it another time. I think they did, but so he was going to potentially be in a sketch, but also maybe the sketch gets cut because he's too high, So, Ron, did you have a thought that you were going to get to a moment ago?
Yeah, talk about the second show with Simon and Garfunkel. Again, that was like more of a music special, Simon and Garfunkel coming back. I think they did like, 2 or 3 songs or whatever. And the repertory cast had like, I don't even know if they had anything to do that week, because I just remember there was just one thing where the cast dressed as the Bees are at home base surrounding Paul Simon, and Paul Simon says, "Oh, wait, did you guys hear the Bees got cut this week?" And they all kind of go off.
Yeah.
But again, that's something that, no matter how big, like I don't see Sabrina Carpenter this weekend doing 3 songs, and then most of it is like I don't know, her on tour or whatever, whatever it was with how they filled the episode. So, I just, again, I find that it's the show trying to figure out what it is and where the focus should be, I think is the most interesting thing about that first season.
Well, you mentioned that the repertory players didn't have much to do, and Garrett Morris wasn't in the show very much, but George Coe was in a lot. And he only was on 1 episode. And then I think it was the first real sketch after the opening was the new dad sketch. And it featured someone who wasn't even on the show, really. Jacqueline Carlin, who's not related to George Carlin, who was dating Chevy Chase and Jane Curtin easily could have played that role. Yeah. But she got cast in, one of the first sketches in the history of the show. I found that to be very odd knowing that now.
On the show, yeah.
First female, and it was not, and I was like, oh, maybe it's George Carlin's daughter. I looked it up. No, it's not. It's Chevy Chase's girlfriend.
Yeah, no, her name was Kelly Carlin. She actually kind of made the rounds after he passed. Yeah, that was. Oh, you're right. That was his daughter. But what I was going to say is that it could just be as simple as even the first week of the show, Jane Curtin, Lorraine Newman, Gilda Radner were all like, "No, I don't want to sit on Chevy's lap. Can I not do that?" So his reputation might have preceded himself. And even the B sketch is like one note.
Yeah.
and
It
it's
is,
like,
yeah.
and then it's like, and tune in next week for basically the same joke,
Same.
but it's bigger because it's the Queen. It's like, all right, you could have put all that in there. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's a drone, and there's definitely some ideas that like that's obviously the bees, they go on and do more with them, but that was the thing that they felt like they needed to keep running out there. But everything's very quick. The Albert Brooks film, I actually didn't remember. I mean, I know I've seen it because I remember as it goes along, but the asking the businessman, it's like, and who's your date here? No, we're just talking. So this idea that he could be with us, it's like 7, I think the age of consent was lowered to 7 is the concept.
Yeah.
And look, that's nothing. I mean, that's nothing compared to the Buck Henry Uncle Roy sketches in 50th anniversary montages of things that aged poorly. You could definitely get Uncle Roy in there. But even in like the early 90s, they would rerun those sketches. I mean, this isn't like, oh, that was just the 70s. It's like, no, they were kind of okay with it for a while. I think that there are some very good Albert Brooks films that were contributed to the show. This one, it was kind of one note. What I will say, and I know that the cast and writers all felt differently, I didn't hate this Muppet sketch. There's ones in coming weeks that aren't as good as this, but it's like, it's all like your A-list Muppet voices and performers. You hear Jim Henson, you hear Frank Oz, you hear some very familiar voices. Yeah, right. Yes, thank you. And it's, it was clearly for an adult audience in 1975 because you're just sort of dealing with, basically malfunction, sexual malfunction. So, but I obviously it's I can see putting the Muppets on the show initially because you're like, we got to fill all this time, but right. I don't think it meshed really well. Did any of you have any thoughts seeing this Muppet sketch? If it worked, or am I just a Muppets homer, which is entirely possible?
Well, I thought
I didn't like it.
Oh,
go ahead.
You didn't like
it.
Go
ahead,
Fred. No, I kind of liked it. I mean, it was definitely in the same vein as like a lot of Muppet sketches, except with a little bit more adult material that Jim Henson and his crew would do on other late night talk shows. I mean, It was definitely a stark contrast from all the stuff that he did since 1969 on Sesame Street, and I think that was one of the things that he really wanted to kind of escape. I mean, the name of the pilot for the Muppet Show that he put together was called Sex and Violence, so he really wanted to kind of get away from that whole children's entertainer container, I guess. And so I thought it was a pretty noble effort in terms of bringing the Muppets to an audience that would not normally see them because they're older than 5 years old or something like that. So I think that the dynamics between the Muppet performers, especially Henson, and the rest of the cast and crew and the writers, that was probably contributing to like some of the tension that went on throughout that there. Sure. And I'm pretty sure, and it looked like that both the SNL and Jim Henson did pretty well afterwards after they split.
I think everybody did okay.
Yeah.
Even Billy Crystal, who got cut from the show. But what were you going to say, Brody? You did not enjoy the Muppet sketch.
I felt like they weren't ready for live television. The timing was off. At one point, the trampy Muppet didn't let go of the bone because he's like, let go of it. Like there was a pass off problem. Yeah, there was dead air a lot where the jokes fell flat and they were waiting for an applause that didn't come. And then they moved. It was very awkward moving sets. It was it just didn't flow in a live performance for me. And I didn't think the jokes were great. I love the puppets, the puppeteering rather. I love the Muppet Show and the movies. I love the Muppets. It was weird for me to see such adult content from such angry looking characters with no lightheartedness at all. Yeah. And it just, to me, didn't fit in the show with what else was going on. It just seemed out of place to me. So I didn't enjoy it. And again, I just thought the timing was way off. They just were like, it was almost like they were going line or like they were like looking, and it just seemed weird to me.
I would agree that yes, they've done appearances on news and talk shows, but typically I think the Muppets work best if you're pre-recording it because there are a lot of things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Ron, did you think the Muppets or anything else in particular stand out as not really fitting in, even in this sort of mishmash variety format?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the Muppets were really, that the sketches themselves were bad. I just don't think it fit in with what the sensibility was of the show. I read in a book. I can't remember if it was Tom Shales and James Andrew Miller's oral history, or if it was the one that was published in the 80s. But one of them said that the clash came from because the Muppets and the SNL crew both represented two different sides of the counterculture. Like Jim Henson represented sort of like the sunny side, the more silly, optimistic side, whereas SNL was the more cynical side, and the two just like just butted heads, and it was like they were almost like doing two separate shows. And again, Brody's right that the Muppets really aren't a live performing act. That they are definitely better when they're pre-recorded, where they can work out the kinks, when they can do multiple takes of something. Whereas aside from the one shot of live TV. So
yeah, no, absolutely. It's I mean, in general, Muppets content is not something that that happens live, and this show kind of shows it. And I feel like it's 6 episodes or so. They move on from the Muppets, but I could definitely be. You'd definitely be wrong on that. I suppose I could look it up, but sometimes
definitely before the end of the first season.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's before the new year. It's like before they get to January 1976. And I'm not sure which one of these it was, by the way, but a phenomenal book that I have owned for many years is Saturday Night: A Backstage History of Saturday Night Live by Doug Hill and Jeff Weingrad. It's funny because I believe at one point it was out of print, but you can read it on Kindle now. So you can still read this book. And if any of us here have not seen or read this book, I would certainly recommend it. And the other book you're talking about, the Tom Shales book, I think is this one.
Yep.
I think that's it. Yeah. Oh yeah. You've got it right there. And what I always like about that book is that they talk to everybody except Eddie Murphy and Dennis Miller.
Except those two,
Tom Shales had written something really shitty about one of Dennis's shows, so he's like, "No, why am I going to talk to him?" He was just like, yeah, why am I going to do that? So, so both of these books are tremendous. And I prefer this one because it really goes in depth. The Tom Shales one looks at, the show as a whole. And it's those earliest years are fascinating to me. I still have a People magazine from 1989 to tie into the 15th anniversary. And I learned so much from that because there were the reruns on Nick at Night from the first 5 years, and then you couldn't see anything from after that for when Lorne wasn't around until a few years later. They would show up on, before Comedy Central, I believe they showed up on Ha.
Yeah.
We had the Comedy Channel and we had Ha. And just like when the WB and UPN were two separate networks, I think everybody knew we needed to bring them together and have the Comedy Channel combined with Ha. And not to bore everybody too much, but fun fact, before it was called Comedy Central, they wanted to call that CTV, Comedy TV, like MTV. Right. But in Canada, City TV is known as CTV. So it was very quick that you got the C's and the desist. And how about Comedy Central? So anyway, that's.
I did have one last thing about the Muppets too. One of the major issues regarding the Muppet sketches were that because of union laws, the Muppet performers could not write their own material, which is what
That's
they
right.
usually did, and so it would
Oh.
had to be written by the SNL writers, and the SNL writers did not want to write for them. I believe it was Michael O'Donoghue who said, "I will not write for Felt" or something like
Yes.
that. So yeah, so that alone did lend itself to the kind of uncomfortable atmosphere between the Muppets and the SNL performers there. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, and in general, people didn't. I forgot that. That is in one of those books. I forget which one where I read it, but that's why everybody should read both of them. But yeah, and I think that there's one of the things that they didn't start doing until later in that run is they used to do audience shots. And then they would have like a little caption under them, still believes in Santa, things like that. And that was one of those things that, you would only that you would see years later because I don't know, I guess because Lorne owned the first 5 years and they were sold off to Nick at Night at one point. And then NBC, I guess, owned the Ebersol years and the Gene Domanian 15 minutes. They own those. I'm still fascinated by those. You can't see complete episodes of any of those.
I want to see a movie about that.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that the last time I saw like a complete Domanian or Ebersol episode was when NBC used to do NBC Up All Night, and they were showing up a classic episode of Saturday Night Live at like 1:30 in the morning or something like that.
You know what? You're right, and those were very carefully selected, though. I think. It would be like when Eddie Murphy guest hosted, and it would be fun to see those because you'd see sketches that weren't in the Comedy Central reruns, and sometimes you're like, "This sketch is great." But yes, Mr. Brody.
I loved that season. I have to be honest with you.
Which one? The first one? The 1980
the Gene Domanian season with Tim Kazurinsky and Gilbert Gottfried.
Well, they're no. Tim Kazurinsky's not on that first season.
No, he wasn't in that,
He's in the first Ebersol season.
Okay, so was it Denny Dillon, Charles Rocket?
Yeah, that's the first one. Gail Mathias,
Mary Gross.
No, Mary Gross is the next year.
All right. Well, whoever the cast was.
But the point is that's
what's that?
Uh-oh. Somebody ring a bell.
I should be back now, but
yes, you are. Yes.
I might sound terrible. Yeah, I leaned on my cord, which
No, we've all been there.
So that Gene Domanian season did have Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo.
And Risley. Right?
Yeah, and Risley was another one, yeah. And those two, and it is that first
Robert Townsend instead of Eddie Murphy. Gene Domanian didn't want to hire Eddie Murphy, but she was vetoed, and Eddie Murphy got on the show. So yeah.
Well, Robert Townsend, I think could have been utilized on SNL. But I don't think anybody would have been able to shine in that series. But this book, again, Backstage History of Saturday Night Live, talks about how Eddie and Piscopo knew they weren't getting fired. So they kind of sat outside the office allegedly and were just kind of like laughing about how everybody was losing their job. It's in the book, some variation on that. I haven't read it in a while, but yeah. So what you're talking about though, Brody, I never saw those episodes. The earliest episode I remember seeing is from what they call the Elvis season, the Martin Short,
84.
Yeah, the 84 and 85, the Christopher Guest doing Saturday Night News. I saw one of those. That's the first time I ever saw it. I recorded it and started recording it regularly by like 87, 88. And so I would see it every week. But so that was my first taste at what it was. I'd heard of it. But you were watching in sort of that heyday, the Tim Kazurinsky with running bits like So I Married a Monkey.
I mean, when he did the words like the diseases, he was the doctor on Weekend Update. If you get it from a bird, it's called chirpies. It was like different. and he would have these cards and he would make pun jokes over and over again. And I was like, I was a young teenager. I loved the puns. So to me, Tim Kazurinsky was great. That
Still is.
We used to go to school, and the next day everyone would recite everything from the night before, right? Yeah. Whether it was Eddie Murphy, Kill My Landlord, or whatever the sketch was, we would reenact them in the cafeteria the next day. Like, oh, did you watch it? I watched it. What was your favorite sketch? So we talked about all of this. So to me, the first cast was like when I was old enough, if like my parents went out on a Saturday and I was, at a friend's house because their parents went out, my parents, and we were up late, like, maybe 3 episodes a season I got to watch, but it wasn't like a regular occurrence back then. But around 80 was when I was like allowed to be up every night. And that's really my first exposure to watching it every single week. And so to me, Denny Dillon and Gilbert Gottfried and Gail Mathias was my cast. So to me, they seemed great because those were the best I was watching.
There's a lot of things that don't work, especially from that season. The most infamous is the leather weather, which is the S&M weather. Yeah, see, Ron knows what I'm talking about. But the strangest thing is Gilbert not doing the Gilbert character we all know. He's just Gilbert as a guy, which you don't ever see outside of those episodes. So, and I think that. Look, by the way, you're talking about the Tim Kazurinsky's words. My version of that, which I actually discovered more from not necessarily the news, were Rich Hall's Sniglets. I love me some Sniglets.
Sniglets was great.
Yeah, I had all the books. It was basically like Sniglets books begat Far Side books. Begat Weird Al Yankovic cassettes, and I was never gonna have a girl look twice at me, basically. So,
and yet you have 2 kids, Chris.
Yeah, I know. I had to move cross country and trick someone, basically. It's the only way it was gonna happen. So. Yeah, and I mean, it's fun to think back on that. I do, so I remember like kind of getting to a point where I needed to watch the show, and it's with my personal favorite cast, which is the 86 to 91 ish cast. That when Carvey and Hartman, and that's to me when the show was firing on all cylinders, and I loved it because it was new. And Fard, at what point do you first ever see the show, and when do you start watching it regularly?
Okay, so I do remember like flashes of the hot dogs, the flying hot dogs in the 1984 season.
That's that 84 season, yeah.
Yeah, but I probably would not have remembered anything in that show. I also remember seeing like Chevy Chase hosting via television set, and then the television fell or something like that.
With musical guest Queen, by the way,
nice.
Doing, I believe they do Under Pressure without Bowie, I think is but yeah. So you remember seeing and I think it's a gimmick. I think Chevy actually was there, but they decided he wasn't actually in LA, but they thought it would be funny. I could be wrong about that. But I'm sorry. So you're saying you remember that?
I do remember that, but again, but I don't remember it as like, oh, I'm watching Saturday Night Live. It's just something I saw on television.
Sure.
So, but the first cast that I remember watching regularly would have been that. I don't think I started watching in 87 because I would have been 7 years old at that point. But I do remember watching that 87 to 91 cast there. So I remember watching Dennis Miller. I remember on the Weekend Update. I remember watching Carpy and Harpin and the rest of those there. So basically I just call that the Circle logo era, except for that first couple of years where it was like
the boxes, But
the boxes on the.
I like that Farad is drawing the line in the sand for 87 because he feels like the show didn't take off until Nealon joined the cast, and I love Nealon on the show. By the way, I did look it up. Yes, on that episode, Queen perform "Crazy Little Thing Called Love" and "Under Pressure" October 16th, 1982. The first appearance that Queen made on American television. So,
oh wow, nice. Yeah.
So, fun facts. That's what people come to me for. Probably not you guys, but they want fun facts. I have a friend who looks like a potato. He enjoys fun facts. What about you, Ron? We're sort of, I kind of mentioned in passing the episode that I think I recorded to watch. I think I convinced my mom to let me set the VCR was because Christopher Reeve was guest hosting. So it's from that season. But when do you remember first seeing it, and when do you start watching regularly?
Well, when I was 8 years old, so this is like early 1980. My sister was, I think, like, 2 years old. There was a big age gap between us, and my parents got the world's greatest babysitter, Tommy Yeager, who was like 13, 14 years old. I loved him because he always let me stay up as late as I wanted, eat pizza at like 11:30 at night, watch R-rated movies on cable. He was the best. And I remember one time we were watching something, and he goes, "Oh, it's Saturday Night Live's on." I'm like, "What's that?" He goes, "Oh, you've never seen it before? Oh, we gotta watch it." And I remember this so vividly. I remember the first thing I remember of Saturday Night Live was Bill Murray at the update desk doing his Oscar bit with the with the chart and stuff like that. It didn't really register what it was at the time. I don't know if I thought it was funny, and it wasn't like, oh my God, I have to watch the show for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I definitely watched the Eddie Murphy seasons, but to me, it wasn't Saturday Night Live. It was the Eddie Murphy show. And then when Billy Crystal came around, it was the Billy Crystal show. When it first started becoming Saturday Night Live was 1986. And I remember it because it was my confirmation. Everyone went home. I was still up. I was still keyed. Turn on, flipping the channels, and I see Dana Carvey as the church lady. And I'm like, what is this? And it hooked me. And ever since then, I've been watching the show since then. And like I said, I analyze the show like some people analyze the New York Yankees or the Giants or whatever. So
if only the Sunday New York Post back page was a recap of Saturday Night Live. By the way, it's not lost on me that after your confirmation, you discovered the church lady. We're proud of ourselves, aren't we? Just because you're part of the church now means you get to touch those little bulbous parts.
Well, the funny thing is that, a lot of teenage boys, at the time, they had pictures of like Heather Locklear in a bikini in their rooms. I had Dana Carvey as the church lady on a poster on my wall. So,
and yet you also have 2 children. This is crazy.
Exactly.
So, Brody, did you kind of stick with it through those 80s years, and was it always a staple for you? Or like much of America, did you kind of lose your way during the Anthony Michael Hall, Robert Downey Jr. season?
I definitely did not watch the Anthony Michael Hall season. I will tell you, I started watching sporadically in the late 80s, and the Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry cheerleader years, I don't think I watched much as it was happening. Whatever was going on in my life, it wasn't that it wasn't funny. I think I was dating the person who became my wife, and I just think I put it on the back burner. I was working in restaurants and retail nights and weekends, and I think I've seen a lot of them, filled in. I watch them on streaming, and I try to catch up. But there was definitely some years where if I look at the cast, I go, yeah, I didn't see a lot of Will Ferrell. I really didn't. I think I picked it up again with Fallon and Horatio Sands and the younger group that the Wayne's World guys, of course, I watched, and Church Lady, those casts. But the cheerleading years, whatever years those were, the mid 90s, maybe, whatever.
Yeah, it started the fall of 95 is when they have the big shakeup, and they let go Sandler and Farley, and they figure out a way to keep Spade by having basically a second Weekend Update segment called Spade in America.
Right.
I do remember him getting a tattoo with Sean Penn during one of those, though. So at least there was there's commitment to the bit. Yeah.
So that cast turnover, I think, is what lost me.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, Kristen, that you and I saw a lot of those years. pretty
Yeah,
much because we had to.
we were
Oh,
pages
yeah.
at NBC. I interned at SNL, and my first show was the show where Norm got fired from Weekend Update and Colin Quinn took over.
Oh, God, I
And
remember.
I've talked about that on a wonderful podcast by my friend Blind Mike. Yes, he's blind, but he chooses to go by the name Blind Mike. Called "Why You Laughing?" The Colin Quinn episode. We talked a lot about what that week was like, and it was kind of surreal because people forget Norm was still on the show for like 2 months after that. Because that was in January and he doesn't leave till March. So he's still in sketches, and at read through, they'd have him reading like characters for like update pieces as features. So the idea would have been him sitting there next to Colin, not doing update. So and then I was a page in '99 for the 25th anniversary. So there was a lot that I got to see, and I've mentioned some anecdotes about taking Billy Crystal to his dressing room, and it just happened to be the dressing room he had when he was on the show. And he was telling me about who all the dressing rooms were and, things he remembered. And I was like, I'm not going back to the desk. I'm going to keep talking to Billy Crystal. And that night of SNL 25 is the first time I ever talked to Dennis Miller as well. So very fond memories of those seasons. And, I don't know how people, what people do when they go on or whatever, but I was there when Fallon first joined the cast. He couldn't have been nicer. Rachel Dratch was always like nervous and kind of like would talk to people like kind of quickly because I think she was trying to, deal with the fact that she was nervous. And everybody on that cast was so nice except Chris Kattan. Everybody was so nice and wonderful to talk to except Chris Kattan. It was so great to get to know Tim Meadows. No, it's not. Yeah. Tim Meadows, fun story. In about like 2005, I'm out here in LA. My dad's visiting and I'm at the farmer's market and Tim Meadows sees me and says, "Hey, Christian." And my dad couldn't believe it. He's like, "He's on TV." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. He's not just on TV. He's the ladies' man." So
And he has bird blindness.
he does have bird blindness over on Peacemaker. Yes, that's very true. And I definitely have times where I kind of fell off on the show. That last season with Farley and Sandler, I was not as in love with Farley and Sandler as some people were. I kind of always liked Spade. I thought the Hollywood Minute was just such a great running bit. I liked early Farley, early Sandler. I think when it kind of turned more into some of those bigger, broader characters. And then the last season they were on, the first season that Norm does Weekend Update, that's a terrible, absolute train wreck season. That's got Janine Garofalo, who, was a very good stand-up at that time. I don't know about now. Chris Elliott could not have been more out of place. It's bad that Abby Elliott fit into SNL better than Chris Elliott did.
And the crazy thing is, on paper, these people should have been a fit, but that whole season was just out of whack.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they bring Molly Shannon in late in that season because they start to realize, what's missing or whatever. But I mean, Laura Keitlinger was in the cast. There's just all these people that you don't remember. So there are a few of those spots where the show starts to really lose its way. And that was kind of a pivotal moment, sort of what Brody's talking about. It definitely reinvigorated it, bringing in Will Ferrell and, all these like Groundlings actors who a lot of people, Will Ferrell will talk about all the mail that NBC got about how much people hated him. He's like, we hate that guy, because they didn't even know his name. What were you going to say, Ron?
Earlier this year, I read the Lorne biography, which is terrific. The interesting thing is that, and I didn't know this, that during that season, NBC approached Judd Apatow to come in as a producer. And what they were basically trying to set up is if Lorne doesn't write the show, then this is our guy. Yeah. And Judd Apatow, just turned it down. He's like, I'm not getting in the middle.
No, you don't want to do that. Yeah. You don't want to go. You don't want to go against Norm. I'm sorry, against Lorne. You don't want to go against Norm either, but I'm more talking about. So I mean, it was easy to keep up with in the age of VCRs because I would always record the show. I'm at a point now where it always shows up on my YouTube TV. I sometimes will watch it. Usually it's because I know something, happened, like, this person came out. If it's the end of the season, I'm going to go right to the end of Weekend Update when Che and Colin Jost write jokes for each other that they're seeing for the first time.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dennis Miller, I shared one of those with him where Colin Jost had to read all these jokes about a black Superman, and anybody who's seen it knows what I'm talking about. And because Che's written like 4 of them for him, and he's like, and if you liked that black Superman joke, I've got another one. And, that's the best. I think that's the best thing that we ever get on the show at this point, But,
because it's spontaneous, and that's something the show's not really known for, and for various reasons. I mean, which a lot of it has to do with.
Go ahead, Brody. Yeah.
So as someone who was in a sketch comedy and improv group, oftentimes improv is sometimes pre-written.
Sure.
And so as a cynical asshole comedy writer that I am, I'm going to tell you there's a 20% chance that that's not the first time they saw the jokes.
My understanding is that they have different jokes in dress rehearsal. Now, look, like there are possibly times, and there's times where something happens in dress rehearsal that they actually air that. There was like, I think a Brendan Fraser episode where somebody's wig came off or something, and they're just like, "This is funnier than the sketch. We'll just show that."
Yeah, I was there.
That was the era where you were there. Yeah. But I know what you're saying.
That was Molly Shannon and Brendan Fraser.
Yeah. But the point is that there's this evolution of the show, and it is very different. And that does bring us to sort of the second side-by-side comparison, which is the season 51 premiere, a week shy of the actual 50th anniversary with, Bad Bunny having him as the host, and kind of the perfect week to have had him as the host, because it had been announced that he was going to be performing at the Super Bowl, and a lot of people lost their mind about it. I don't lose my mind about the halftime at the Super Bowl, because the year that they put something on that I want to see is really going to just cramp my style, because they got a lot of things to get to during that. There's sandwiches to make. There's so many things to do. So I love not watching the halftime at the Super Bowl. The idea that people wanted Metallica to do it because it was in the Bay Area. It's going to be in San Francisco, and I was like, I don't want that. I'd have to watch. So, there's that level of this show, and it feels very familiar. There's many new cast members, but you could have told me that everyone on that show was on in the season before. I'd be like, okay, you're probably right. I wouldn't be able to point to like, no, this person definitely wasn't there last year. I don't know. Maybe not. Well, there was the one guy there. Yeah, that's true. There was there was the guy who it's worth pointing out, the African-American gentleman who wanted to know when he gets to when he gets to use the N-word. He's like, when can I do it? And then it's funny because he's like, well, Chase said it in 2016, so he's making a point, but and that's kind of like what I liked about Leslie Jones when she was on Weekend Update. It was very reminiscent of I think Eddie Murphy really carves out, yes, he's those characters, but he'd be there in the Adidas zip up, hoodless sweatshirt. And he was just, kind of like angry and really speaking his mind and just plainly talking. And I think that's how that works. I don't know how well it works when Bowen Yang is a character from Harry Potter whose toga keeps falling off. So that being said, there are definitely things that make the show worth looking at, but cameo appearances from the K-pop Demon Hunter girls, it's like there's times when you watch this show when you're like, they should have filmed it in the TikTok orientation, because that's why this is here, so that they can post it. Brody, I kind of I've checked the answer key. I've cheated a little bit because I know how you felt about the 51st season premiere. So why don't you tell the rest of our esteemed panel and of course our audience what you thought about the Bad Bunny / Doja Cat SNL 51st season premiere.
Well, like you, Doja Cat got much more billing than deserved. But Bad Bunny was the pinnacle of zeitgeist. He was the biggest polarizing. By the way, Otani just hit a ball out of Dodger Stadium. Sorry, the TV on behind me. Anyway,
that'll age well.
So, yeah, that'll age well. For those of you not listening in real time,
it'll probably happen next week too. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. So he's the biggest story in the country on both sides of the aisle. He made one little joke in his monologue about you've got 4 months to learn Spanish. Yeah. And then they didn't do a sketch. They didn't do a halftime sketch where, like with old people not understanding him, or like rednecks sitting in front of a TV. There's so much they could have done to own it and have it talked about and go viral, and they did nothing. Instead, they took Bad Bunny and Marcelo, who I love, and put them in every sketch and made every sketch a Hispanic joke or a Univision sketch. And, Bad Bunny's very talented. But you made him a Spanish guy, a Hispanic guy speaking like with an accent, rather than just a performer being funny in a sketch. Everything was about his accent and his culture, which I felt was like, I get it, like in 1 or 2 sketches, but if you have a Jewish guy on, not every sketch is a Jewish sketch. So I just felt they overdid that aspect of his persona while missing the biggest thing about the fact that he's Hispanic, in that people hate him or love him and do a bit about it. And I just thought they dropped the ball. And the writing, the first thing I said to you, Christian, and everybody was, how a rock band always puts everything they have into the first album because they've been writing it for 7 years, and it's always the second one that's the challenge. They had 6 months basically to write this episode, and it was terrible. Terrible. Well, did they just find out Bad Bunny was the host?
But they don't actually start writing until Monday night.
No, of course not.
But you could have had some idea. Yeah, you could have had some idea. I
you're in a coffee shop in June and something funny happens. You're like, oh, I'll make a sketch about what I just saw at the coffee shop. But it was terrible.
No, and I would actually say the second episode with Amy Poehler is much better than this one. And that's actually on the 50th anniversary. But Farad, what do you think as you see this Bad Bunny season 51 premiere? And before you actually answer the question, I did grab this from the second episode, which is the throwback interstitial bumper image to look like from the original series, the original season, even listing it as NBC's Saturday Night. But what did you think of the Bad Bunny episode, Farad?
Well, first of all, I really love that. I really love that image from the bumper because it did. I believe it referenced the cabbie eating watermelon outside of his cab in the first season's opener.
Yeah, it's in the opening credits. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so yeah, I thought the Bad Bunny episode was a tad uneven. I mean, I still enjoyed watching it. I watched it again just to prepare for this meeting here. But no, I thought that some of the sketches were a little bit too weird, like that one about being a donor for a sperm donor for a same-sex couple.
Yeah.
I mean that could have been played by anybody, but at the same time, because they just really put him in like a wig and all different sorts of like weird clothing and everything like that. So that was a bit. So I found that one to be a bit strange, and probably, and I'm guessing that was like a sketch that was like pre-written, and they just wouldn't put anyone in there. One sketch I really did enjoy looking into was the El Chavo del Ocho sketch, and that was
so is that from the end of the show? Is
yes.
That yeah? So that's the Telemundo. Like I know enough where I've seen some of that imagery. It's variety / sketch show. I don't know that much about it, but you could kind of see these broad cartoony characters, and Bad Bunny sort of as like the adult man pretending to be a little boy in the little cap. So I think it was like, oh, it's interesting because I know what this is, but it did, it's one of those where you're like, oh, this isn't for me. So
it was like it was like the Fred Armisen character, the Dios míos.
Dios mío. Yeah, I forgot about him.
But
finish
no,
your
actually,
thought, Brad. Yeah.
that was actually based off of an actual show. El
Yeah.
Chapo's an old show. I mean, the guy who created it had a professional name of Chespirito, or Little Shakespeare, and he played the character that Marcelo Hernandez played in the sketch, and Bad Bunny played like another child in the sketch. So it's like all the people that were in. I think the characters played by Sarah Sherman, Bad Bunny, and Marcelo were all children, and the rest of them were supposed to be adults. Yeah. And there's actually a bio drama based on Chespirito's life on HBO Max. It's called Chespirito Not Exactly on Purpose, or something like that. And it's a fascinating look into his life and the making of the show and everything, because he did like other shows. In fact, there was one character he did called the El Chapulín Colorado, the red cricket or something like that, and that was actually the inspiration and the gestation point for the Bumblebee Man in The Simpsons. So this guy has like a lot of influence, not only on Spanish television but also on American television. So yeah,
right. I mean, even I didn't know any of the things that you said, but I recognize the imagery of it. Okay, I know what this is. And that, by the way, that is all fairly interesting. And
I had no idea what it was either up until I like Googled it or something like that.
I see. Go ahead, Mr. Brody.
If that is a spot-on spoof parody of an actual show, which I assumed, and it's targeted at an audience that remembers the original show, I suddenly understand the Super Bowl Bud Bunny controversy.
Jeez.
I totally get it now. Because Bad Bunny is a brilliantly talented performer. That is not my genre of music.
Of course. Yes.
But I understand that he's talented. And you're saying, probably rightfully so, that was a brilliant parody of an original, Telemundo show that if you get it, you get it. You're like, that's brilliant. But as someone watching it who doesn't get it, I was like, what the hell is this? It's horrible. It's not funny. So I felt out of place, much like,
sorry.
I felt out of place, like certain people will be out of place, come Super Bowl time. So I get it. I'm not angry about it, but
Yeah, go ahead, Fard.
No, I believe that in an early version of the sketch, the other characters aside from Bad Bunny were actually asking him, "What is the sketch about?" And he started explaining as to what the show was, and who these people are, and they were trying to see who amongst them were actual children, who were adults, and everything like that. There was a little bit more of an explanation, but I guess it had to be cut for time, so they just made it just like a straight on.
It's at the end of the show, and I'm about a minute and a half into it, and I'm like checking. I'm like, show's got to be over now, right? And it's why, so many times, when you're watching the show live, the good nights just cut off like that, and then when it's in a rerun, you're able to see it because they'll take out one of those behind the scenes or one of the band performances things. Ron, what did you think checking out this Bad Bunny season 51 premiere?
Well, talking about Bad Bunny's talents, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that he had a actual couple of matches for the World Wrestling Entertainment about 2 years ago. He was even in the Royal Rumble.
Wow.
So he's also a very talented wrestler. So,
but did he wrestle in Spanish?
But that's what I thought the episode was very. There was like this whole thing with this faction called the Latino World Order, where it's like all these luchadors and stuff like that. So, but that's for another time.
So what did you? That is interesting. I didn't know that. Ron is one of my go-tos on professional wrestling. I always appreciate that. I
just thought it was. Yeah, I thought the season premiere was very weak. I was, I kind of had the same, reaction. Like, wow, they had all this time, and like even if they don't like start writing till Monday or whatever, but this is the best they can come up with. I think the Amy Poehler episode was far better. I don't know if it was like maybe that's still hangover from the 50th anniversary season, or there was like tons of, turnover in the cast, people leaving, people coming, like all that controversy. I don't know, but I thought that the Amy Poehler episode was like far, far better.
Yeah,
and it's
I
actually
think
the
Go ahead.
Univision sketch is actually interesting because you mentioned about how if you didn't have knowledge of that, you'd be like, what the hell's going on here? I can see that, but also like think back to the early episodes where Bill Murray is asking "Quieres más machos, Fernando Lamas or Calderón de Bon?" So it's it's not something that hasn't been done on SNL.
No. And by the way, the answer in 1979 is the same answer now. Ricardo Montalban, obviously. I mean, I don't know why we're even talking about it. Quienes más macho? Ricardo Montalban. Not gone. Yeah, it's not.
But that sketch wasn't to me unfunny because it was in Spanish. It was unfunny because I didn't get where they were going.
Yeah.
Like if they had put English subtitles that explained what you were seeing, not translating, but like, that guy's really 40. You go, oh, he's playing a kid.
I use this outdated example all the time on shows with Brody. You needed the VH1 pop-up video explaining.
Yes, I needed humor that was targeted to me, that would play off creatively against the humor that was created to somebody else by putting in they're like pop-up videos, but like instead of subtitles, they look like subtitles, but they're actually English notes of what you're watching. It's just something to explain something that could have been funnier.
I find it to be close to the humor of Mystery Science Theater 3000 with the 10-to-1 sketches like that, because it's if not everybody will get it, but the right people will get it. And the response that I've seen online from people who said, I remember watching this show 30 years ago or something like that, I feel seen and everything like that. I felt really, really warmed by the fact that a lot of people who had seen the show or shows similar to it for other shows from Chef Burrito would feel not entirely represented, but at the very least they feel acknowledged by Saturday Night Live, which is something that is kind of rare. I don't think that's really. I mean, aside from the Sabdo Gigante sketch from like a season or two ago, you don't really see a lot of like Spanish television references or Latin American television references in SNL. So I figured I thought that was a rather cool way to do it. And it's a 10-to-1 sketch. It wasn't really meant to be it was really meant to be explained at the very end. It wasn't really meant to be explained to everybody there. And Google exists, so people could be able to look it up. But I do think that particular sketch was it was definitely for a very niche audience. But I'm glad that it existed. So there you go.
Sure.
Okay, but you know what? Googling. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just in the chat. Chris Tuthill checking in from across the pond. Pop-up video. How I discovered Smashing Pumpkins, interesting, and shaped my teens. Also, why I went bald. I don't know. Maybe I want that story. And he also said for halftime at the Super Bowl, Kid Rock, obvious choice. Or the Beach Boys. No. I think we all know what he's trying to say. Is that the people who are complaining about Bad Bunny are like, why not Kid Rock?
Oh, okay, gotcha.
A two-hit wonder. Yeah.
However, if Ted Nugent comes out to do a little Wang Dang Sweet Poo-Tang, I am actually going to have to watch. But I don't think we're there now. And go ahead, Brody, with what you were going to say.
I was going to say, I think Farad looking it up made it interesting. Absolutely. But to me, it's like, if I eat a really bad meal and I Google the ingredients so I understand it better, I'm still going to not enjoy the meal. And so I appreciate the backstory. The thing with Sabado Gigante is it's so over the top with like big boobed women and stunts, and like it's visually funny, whether I know what's going on or not. It's like watching a silent film with the Keystone Cops. I don't need to know what they were saying. They're running into each other and they're falling down a ladder, and that's great. But this sketch was like, they're all crying. Like, it's just, you really had to know it in the moment. After the fact, you go, oh yeah, I get, but it's too late. I didn't laugh. So
what you're saying,
it's
Brody,
a niche thing, but it's too niche for me, is all I'm saying.
What you're saying, Brody, is you looked up the ingredients of that sketch and it was 99% riboflavin, and you were like, well, that actually makes sense. Yeah, spinach. That makes it interesting, and obviously, you have you have Bad Bunny. Sort of the walk on that wasn't for TikTok. It was fun to see Benicio del Toro. I don't know that he really added that much, but I do love him. He's great in the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie. He's also typically great in everything. So it was one of those where like, okay, that's fun. Yeah, I don't know how much any of those things added. One thing that I'll say for people who watch the show, it was noteworthy to see Colin Jost in a sketch, but at least they had the sense to realize, oh, there's only one guy who could play Pete Hegseth, and it's Jost, and he was perfect for it. And
he froze really well. He did a great job of freezing. He really did.
Yeah. And I even like the James Austin Johnson. That's the guy who does Trump. He's like, I'm surprised you're not with all your friends at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, which is a very, very nice reference. And Jost is like, yeah, they didn't invite me. So, it's because they know he's married to an Avenger. So they figure like, let's keep him out of our country. I think stuff like that's fun, because like Seth Meyers used to be in sketches, and then when he was doing Update, he really wasn't. Dennis Miller wasn't in sketches except for when everyone else was in a sketch and they needed somebody to be a waiter. So that's always fun.
He also played Gary Hart very memorably in a
you're
wonderful.
right.
That's great cast.
Coco, Michu, and LeBay either.
I was going to say he also wrote Coco, Michu, and LeBay because he wanted to prove that he could get any piece of crap on the air if he just pretended it was artsy. And
that's a neat sketch right there.
That's him, Carvey, and Nealon as three clowns. I think using divining rods to find water or something. But anyway, it's not here nor there. I think that it follows kind of what this show has become, and it's a lot of like viral. I mean, especially last year leading up to the election, it was always like this person as this character. The fundamental moment of this show in its current iteration was, when Brad Pitt comes out as Dr. Fauci, and you're like, okay, but why? It's a lot of that. Lovitz is George Santos, who, by the way, was had his sentence commuted today. All
the important things are getting done.
Yeah, exactly.
Things.
But that's like, oh yeah, of course. He comes out and he does his Tommy Flanagan. Yeah. And my wife. I was with my wife. No. He was George Santos, but he did the voice. And my wife, Morgan Fairchild. Yeah. So, those things are great. I mean, we're going back a ways, but Tina Fey as Sarah Palin, it was like, well, it had to happen. You know what I mean? There are those times, but when it's just gimmicky, and stop trying to put Robert De Niro in comedy sketches.
Yeah.
Kimmel did it in his first show back and had him play the head of the FCC. The guy's not funny. He can be in a comedy. He's great in Midnight Run, but doing like late night comedy, that's not Bobby D's wheelhouse, as they say.
His real name was Alonzo Mosley. Midnight Run reference. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, I thought that was the guy who played TC on Magnum PI.
No, you're gonna have fistophobia.
It's Roger E. Mosley, which is really what people tune into. Don't worry, I got a good hunk on Larry Minetti that I'll get to in another show. What were things that stood out from this premiere? Because man, they are two very different episodes, and in between episode 1 and whatever the 51st season premiere episode number is, there's so many great episodes somewhere in between, and neither one of these is particularly great. It's almost like the SNL premiere. It's like you hear the demo recordings of like one of your favorite albums, like, oh man, this is so different, so it's cool, but it's not really good. But this should be good because they've had so many years to perfect it. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that stood out? Is there any sketch, any breakout performers, anything that we should get to? I'll ask you, Mr. Brody.
Well, I want to just say that the reason that Ron liked the second episode so much, as he calls it, the Amy Poehler episode, that's why, because it was the Amy Poehler episode, because the writers had an actual comedic performer to be in various different vibe sketches. Plus, you have Tina Fey show up as Christy Nome, which was perfect casting. You've got Seth Meyers show up, and by the way, obviously that joke off was pre-written and very.
Those are definitely pre-written.
Yeah, right. It was way over the top how seriously they didn't take it, which was fine. The jokes were good, but having Amy Poehler as your muse makes for easy writing as opposed to Bad Bunny, who can only do so much as him. So I think that played a large part in why the show is better. Plus, I don't know how much she contributed, how much Tina Fey got involved and helped to write some sketches, or Seth or whatever. So to me, it's always about the guest as much as anything. And I find sometimes you see the guest, you're like, what a terrible guest. And I already know the writing is going to be terrible because how much can you do with a guest who you already know is terrible? So to me, I wasn't expecting much of Bad Bunny. Not that he's not talented. He's not going to do a Scottish accent in a bit, right? Amy Poehler can do multiple characters and styles of comedy and different costumes and makeup. And Bad Bunny was like, hey, he's playing Bad Bunny in this. Oh, look, they dressed up Bad Bunny. He was always Bad Bunny.
Yeah.
So
good. There's weeks like this that it just makes it more apparent of, yes, he's getting older, but Steve Martin hasn't hosted in like 8 years. Tom Hanks hasn't hosted in a while. Those were guys you could count on at least once a season. Some of those 70s years, Steve Martin would host twice, enough so that you actually thought he was a cast. I thought he was a cast member because the way that they were presented in those Nick at Night reruns, it was everybody, the cast all put together. I didn't realize he had so many recurring bits. And, so
Buck Henry also.
Yeah, but that's Uncle Roy. So it all comes back together. But he was in all the samurai sketches, Buck Henry. So yeah. So look, this was an interesting experiment, but the idea of watching the first one of this season, even if the Amy Poehler one had been the first one of the season, it's just so apparent of how different that show is. But we all have our favorite moments that we enjoy in between, and some of them it's massive head ruined Harry. Just when you think back, there's never any shortage of some of those great things. There's so many great recurring characters from the 51 seasons of this show, and there's also Mango and Mr. Peepers. But in addition to that, there's so many great recurring characters. Don't let it be said that I don't keep a huge chip on my shoulder for
the best sketch Chris Kattan ever did was the broken neck sketch. Have you seen that one?
When he actually broke his neck.
I was like, I'm trying to remember what that was, but yeah.
Did you ever see Jim Brewer's routine on Chris Kattan and Norm Macdonald? Google it. It's hilarious. Yeah, it is absolutely hilarious.
And Brewer was there when I was an intern. I assume when you were Page, he was still there. Yeah. I was there sort of at the end of Brewer being on the show. Like I was an intern the last episode he was there. That wasn't. The way it works is that they don't tell you like, oh yeah, you're not back next year. I mean, sometimes people choose to, and they don't, necessarily know, but you could see that he was a guy who was frustrated being a part of, of that show at that point. He was always very nice. You want to talk about people who remember me from things, and it's not just because I was also a Mets fan, but it helps. But I do remember being up in the offices in the 17th floor, and just Jim Brewer just being livid because they cut a sketch of his, and they put on one that Adam McKay did. Who we all know Adam McKay, as a director, and it was a very similar idea and so much less funny than his, but because of the politics of the show, his got cut. And he's said, I've heard Brewer say, is that, Lauren was like, you're too nice for this show, so that was just he was just too nice of a guy. He wasn't cutthroat and all that, but I have fond memories of talk about bits that weren't great, but as they go along, I would laugh at Goat Boy. It was such a dumb idea, but every sketch I was laughing at some point. So anyway, just some fun memories, and I look forward to doing this again in 50 years when we're talking about the 100th season. That you laugh, but Ron, I don't think during that year that I worked on the 25th season that I was thinking about talking about this show 25 years hence. But in any case, Ron, if people want to find you, are you out there on social media, or do you like to fly below the radar?
No, I'm out there, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and
so just look for Ron Motta.
Yep, Ron Motta.
And you only need to go back. You only need to go back about 100 episodes for Blackcast 561, which was the very special episode that Ron and I did. Ron, you were talking about how you had a great babysitter growing up, which is great to hear. The one that I had, unfortunately, always wanted to play Neptune, King of the Sea, so I would sleep out in the backyard. I knew that would get a big laugh out of Ron.
It kills me every time. Every time someone mentions that, it kills me.
Yeah, it's always a little hard to watch reruns of WKRP in Cincinnati because Gordon Jump as the big guy, but it's almost time for your favorite annual post.
Yes, it is.
Which is
the funniest half hour on television ever produced.
Yeah,
I will go to my grave saying that.
Yeah, which is, of course, the turkey drop episode.
Turkey episode,
today. And Howard Hessman had talked about how they wanted to fire him because he couldn't stop laughing during the, God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. This is so funny. But anyway.
The entire episode built up to that one line, which is what I love about it.
Yeah,
the entire episode.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
It's a slow build to that one line.
And Fard, other than being the official voice of the Blackcast,
thank you.
Think, people need to know that. Where else can you be found?
Well, I'm on all the things. I'm on Threads, Instagram, Facebook. I have a TikTok, but I don't really use it all that much. But I am also on YouTube. I'm trying to do a new series of videos called The Talk Show. And I did a short recently that talked about how the 51st season premiere took place on the 50th anniversary of what was supposed to be the premiere of SNL.
Right.
And I talk about that. There was an episode of the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder that wasn't there in its place. You can be able to find that on YouTube. It's under WTFG 78 because I'm trying to make it like an old UHF station. But just find me on Fard Muhammad. That's Fard Muhammad, but it's pronounced Farad. I get that all the time. I'm getting a stage name. Yeah. But anyway, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. If there, by the way, as someone who is a student, a scholar of late night television, someone who celebrates TV from the Chicagoland area, from where you originate. If there's anyone who will ever get to the bottom of the hacking of the broadcast signal with the max headroom, it's you. I can't wait until you post the video, which went over an episode of Doctor Who, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They interrupted an episode of Doctor Who, and I think that the station got so many calls because it's like, wow, these effects are so much better than usual. The guy slapping his naked bottom, which I think that's 1987.
Yes.
Also breaking into channels across the realm of broadcasting, the Brooklyn Boys. Let everybody know where they can find that and what's new in the merch store.
Oh, well, the Brooklyn Boys podcast, dropping 2 episodes every week, wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our merchandise at brooklynboys.bigcartel.com and find me on social media at David Brody everywhere. X, we'll call it Twitter if you want.
Sure.
Instagram. You can even find me on Blue Sky, where I assume most people tomorrow will be marching instead of being on Blue Sky.
You could have blue sky in your hand while you march.
Yes,
I assume.
but they
yes.
have to hold those pre-printed signs they got from George Soros. So
Oh,
they'll be
God,
busy.
you know
I know.
what?
I know. I just submitted my direct deposit, so now I don't have to get this anymore. I'm very excited. Nobody's happier to be a paid protester. And by the way, if the other side just wants to give me $1 more, I will be a paid protester for you. I have no standards, no scruples, no nothing. But you can find me on social media at Christian DMZ. And of course, I host the Blattcast, BLADTCAST. And I also was featured for the first time as the guest on 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal, discussing Aerosmith's Rats in the Cellar. It was shockingly the first time we covered Aerosmith. The show was hosted by Metal Blade Records CEO Brian Slagle. And as we're talking about late night television and we're talking about heavy metal and hard rock, we lost Ace Frehley from Kiss this week. And the best way to commemorate the spaceman's memory is to watch The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder from Halloween night,
Yes.
1979.
Yep.
And Tom and Ace hit it off. And Gene and Paul want to murder him
Not
6
happy.
ways from Sunday. And we covered that way back on Blattcast number 3.
Nice.
That's how long ago we talked about it. I've talked about it on my show, Who Are These Broadcasters, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel. And that's the way that I choose to remember the great spaceman, Ace Frehley. So that's all the time we have for now. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks to everyone at Geekscape. And for the rest of you, we will see you next time on the Blattcast.